It is such a pleasure to be with all of you here tonight to tell you about GLAD's work and our aspirations for our community. I've been a GLAD attorney for 22 years, but GLAD is far more to me than just my employer. GLAD has always been a vital, courageous, and core part of the community that I came out into in 1979. So I'd like to start by taking a few minutes to share some personal reflections about how I first experienced our community and the ways that shaped me as a gay man and later as a GLAD lawyer. When I came home from college for the summer of 1979, newly out of the closet, I decided that I would go to meetings of the Committee for Gay Youth, the predecessor to Bagley that met in the basement of the Arlington Street Church. On my first attempt, I walked from my home to the Green Line train station and then turned around and walked home. The second time, I got so far as to pace up and down the sidewalk in front of the church. The third time, I went in. A tall boy in a leopard print outfit immediately approached me, flung his leg up to my shoulder, and said, "Hi, dear, want to see my high kick?" I confess that I was moderately terrified, but I had just joined our community. Thank you. Bagley was the most diverse group that I have ever been part of in gender identity and expression, race, class, socioeconomic status, and the wide range of life experiences. Many of our members were people who today would identify as transgender, but the word didn't exist back then. We were kids from college, kids who had dropped out of high school, suburban youth, youth of color from Roxbury and Mattapan, Irish youth from South Boston. Many of us had never spent time outside the neighborhood we grew up in. Our group included people living on the streets, people engaged in survival sex, people who were trying to understand their identities in a hostile world, and people for whom the refuge of Bagley's space meant staying alive. We had a lot of wild times. We also had conflict, and we were queer youth, so there was plenty of drama. We weren't always perfect at understanding each other. But with all of these vast differences, there was a fundamental awareness among us that we created that space for all of us, that we were part of the same group, the same community. That belief that we can create community, and through that we can bring real change to the world, and we have, has always been central to my work at GLAD. Thank you. During those early years, I met a visionary attorney named John Ward. He was the only openly gay lawyer in Boston and founded GLAD to fight a police sting operation against gay men at the Boston Public Library. John was fighting our own as they were under attack by a legal system that sought to shame and persecute them. And I am so delighted that our founder, John Ward, has come from San Francisco to be here tonight. Thank you, John. Another attorney who was there practically from the beginning was our extraordinary legal director, Gary Busick. Gary's talent, insight, and wisdom has been essential to all of our victories. It was only a few years after my time in Bagley that the AIDS epidemic hit our community. It was quickly apparent in the midst of this cataclysm in which people were dying, sometimes within months of diagnosis, that we could not count on the government to look out for us, we could not count on corporate America to support us, and we could not count on the legal system to protect us. We had to take care of each other. Our community was imperfect in 1979, and it is imperfect today. But GLAD, from its very founding, has never lost sight of the aspiration of a community for all that takes care of all of us. So what does that mean for the work today? It means that no part of our community can be excluded from our bedrock civil rights non-discrimination laws. In 2011, our community won a first important step when we passed a law to protect transgender people from discrimination in employment, housing, credit, and lending. But transgender people were left out of the public accommodations non-discrimination laws. It's kind of hard to live if you can't go to the bathroom, or if a security guard can accost you and question you about who you are. GLAD, along with our friends in the Freedom Massachusetts Coalition, including the Massachusetts Transgender Political Coalition, Mass Equality, Mass Gay and Lesbian Political Caucus, Bagley, HRC, and so many of you here in this room worked for years to change that. Tonight, we celebrate the passage of legislation that expressly protects transgender people in public spaces in the Commonwealth. We deeply appreciate our legislative leaders who fought so hard for this victory. Thank you, Senate President Stan Rosenberg, Senator Sonia Chang Diaz, and Representatives Byron Rushing, Denise Provost, John Fernandez, and so many others. And for our opponents out there who want to roll back rights for transgender people and put equality for transgender people on the ballot in 2018, I don't think they understand who we are. Our community fought like hell for nearly 10 years to get these basic protections, and you can bet your life we are going to fight like hell to keep them. Exclusions on the federal level need to be rectified too. When the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990, it contained a definition of the word disability that was meant to prohibit discrimination in a very broad way when people were subjected to unequal treatment due to stereotypes about their health conditions. In 1998, GLAD won a case at the U.S. Supreme Court establishing nationwide non-discrimination protections for people with HIV under this law. Thank you. But when the ADA was debated in Congress, Senator Jesse Helms, some of you may remember him. Yes, you do. Jesse Helms and his friends convinced Congress to exclude from the ADA a list of health conditions that they deemed to be, as they put it, abhorrent. And they included in that list gender identity disorder, as the term was used in the legislation back then. This exclusion had no legitimate purpose. Its only purpose was to enshrine in federal law the moral disapproval of transgender people. And an exclusion like that has got to go. I am so thrilled to tell you that our Transgender Rights Project Director, Jennifer Levi, is working on a case to once and for all strike down this unconstitutional discrimination, the first time that's going to happen in this country. Taking care of all of us also means that we must seize the remarkable opportunity we have right now to end the HIV epidemic. Today, there is a medication known as pre-exposure prophylaxis, or PrEP, that when taken by HIV-negative people reduces the risk of HIV transmission by close to 100%. That is extraordinary. But now we are finding that life insurers, disability insurers, other insurers all over the country are discriminating against people who take PrEP. They are discriminating against people who are taking responsibility for their health and reducing their risk of HIV infection. In the only case in the country challenging this practice, GLAAD is suing Mutual of Omaha for denying long-term care insurance to a gay man solely because he takes PrEP. Thank you. Now, some people have been a little puzzled by this, so let's break it down. Mutual of Omaha would provide the insurance to the identical person who is not on PrEP. So they're an insurance company that is insuring the higher risk and excluding the lower risk. That is not how a rational insurance company operates. This is plain and simple discrimination based on irrational fears about HIV transmission and negative attitudes about gay male sexuality. I have received telephone calls. People still use the telephone today, occasionally. I've received calls from people who are asking me whether they should forego PrEP until they get insurance. Think about that. We cannot let discrimination deter people from taking the medication that could end the epidemic. And we need to make sure that the promise of PrEP is a reality for our youth, especially young gay and bisexual men of color who have the highest risk of HIV among young people. That is why GLAAD in the coming months will be creating legal guidance for healthcare providers about prescribing PrEP to teenagers, even without parental permission. A community for all of us that takes care of all of us means that even as we face the challenges of ending the epidemic in this new generation, we can never forget our longest-term survivors. The first life-saving medications that emerged in the 1990s caused damaging side effects, including lipodystrophy, which is the development of disfiguring fat growths as well as facial wasting. This is one of the most underappreciated and unattended issues in the epidemic. For some people, lipodystrophy is so severe that they do not leave their homes. They become shut-ins, depressed, and suicidal. And insurance companies, what do? They trivialize this, and they refuse to cover the simple, effective treatments for lipodystrophy because they regarded them as just cosmetic. Now, we won some insurance cases, but it became pretty clear that we needed systemic change. Together with then Representative Carl Shortino, now Executive Director of AIDS Action Committee. Yes, Carl. Thank you, Carl, who was the original sponsor of this bill and then worked on it with us when he was at AIDS Action. We filed legislation. GLAAD founded the Treat Lipodystrophy Coalition, and this year, Massachusetts became the first state in the nation to mandate insurance coverage for lipodystrophy. Now the people who lived through the worst years of the epidemic, lost loved ones, and participated in the clinical trials that improved and extended life for later generations can finally get the health care they deserve. Thank you again, Senate President Stan Rosenberg, our Senate sponsor, Senator Mark Montigny, and the Senate, I will tell you, had a bipartisan, unanimous roll call vote. Everyone, Democrats and Republicans, voted for this bill. And thank you also to our House Speaker, Representative Sarah Peake, and House Speaker Robert DeLeo. Our legislature has always been there for people with HIV. Taking care of all of us also means that in a society that marginalizes every group at risk for HIV, GLAAD has always fought for all people with HIV. Last November, the town of Barnstable shut down a program operated by AIDS Support Group of Cape Cod that provides people who inject drugs with access to clean needles to prevent HIV and hepatitis C transmission. It also gave them Narcan to reverse drug overdoses. In the midst In the midst of the opioid epidemic, the quaint village of Hyannis, and you've probably been there, the quaint village of Hyannis was willing to risk people's lives because they were more concerned about their image as a tourist town. GLAD and our co-consulated AIDS action won a court order immediately reopening the program. But for some reason, the town will not give up. So we will be seeing them again, this time on appeal, where we will establish a statewide precedent affirming the legality of clean needle distribution in Massachusetts. Taking care of all of us means that all parents must be recognized as legal parents to their children, no matter how their family was formed. Just this month, GLAD's Civil Rights Project Director, Mary Bonato, and our newest attorney, Mary, along with our newest attorney, Polly Crozier, and cooperating attorney, yes, welcome, Polly. Mary, Polly, and our cooperating attorney, Elizabeth Roberts, won a groundbreaking case. The triumvirate of family law is very popular. They do almost all of the groundbreaking cases, and they won a huge case on behalf of Karen Partinen. This ruling established that children should not be deprived of both of their parents just because the parents did not marry or used assisted reproduction. This is a major victory for children who deserve access to the love and care of both of their rightful parents. And finally, a community for all of us means that we must bring to our efforts to stop discrimination, harassment, and bullying a deeper understanding of the interconnection of race, gender, and sexual orientation discrimination. GLAD attorney Allison Wright has been representing an African-American teenage girl who is attending a primarily white school in South Windsor, Connecticut. Working with GLAD has helped give our client, Ariana, confidence to be herself. This May, Ariana courageously attended her prom as the person she is. I am so pleased that Ariana and her mother, Shabri, are here tonight. Ariana, your bravery standing up for what is right is an inspiration to all of us as we go forward. "37 years after I nervously walked through the door of Boston's gay youth group, we have made tremendous progress, and we have so far to go. For its part, GLAD will never stop working and fighting until we live in a world in which every LGBTQ youth can experience their adolescence under the same conditions and with all of the same opportunities as the rest of their peers." Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you tonight for joining us on this path. Thank you very much.